Welcome back to the AnzenGuard podcast. I'm Michael Reynolds, your guide to the digital world.
And I'm Laura Wilson. I'm here to break it all down for you.
Today, we're going deep on IP masking. It's really important these days for online privacy and security.
It's a big one for sure.
Yeah.
We always talk about protecting your personal information online. Well, your IP address is a big part of that.
So for those of us who maybe aren't, super techie, what is an IP address?
Well, think of it like your digital street address. So every device that connects to the internet, whether it's your phone or your laptop, even your smart refrigerator, gets a unique IP address.
So that's how the internet knows where to send, like, all the cat videos that I watch.
Exactly. It's how everything finds you, websites, emails, all that data gets to your device because of that address. But here's the thing.
Okay.
Just like your physical address, your IP address can actually reveal a lot about you.
Wait, so you're saying someone can figure out where I live just from my IP address?
It's possible, yeah. Your IP address can give away your location, at least your city or region, and it can tell people who your internet service provider is.
Okay, that's a little creepy. So that's where IP masking comes in.
Exactly. IP masking is basically hiding your real IP address, making it harder for others to track you online.
So like putting on a digital disguise.
Yeah, you got it. And there are a lot of reasons to do this. Maybe you want to avoid those targeted ads or get around those geo restrictions on streaming services or just protect your privacy on public Wi-Fi.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
Huh.
But how does IP masking actually work? It sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It's actually not as complicated as it sounds. One of the most common ways is using a proxy server.
Okay, break that down for me. What is a proxy server?
Imagine you're sending a letter and you don't want the person to know your real address, so you send it to a friend and they forward it on with their address on it.
Oh, okay, so the proxy server is like that friend. It's hiding my real IP address.
Exactly. The website you're visiting only sees the proxy server's IP address, not yours. It's like having a middleman for your internet traffic.
Clever, but what if I want, like, even more privacy and security? Is there something stronger than a proxy server?
There is. VPNs, or virtual private networks. They create a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet.
So it's like sending my internet traffic through like a secret underground passage.
Yeah, you could say that in like a proxy server. A VPN routes your traffic through a different server, masking your real IP address.
Wow.
But the encryption adds an extra layer of protection, making it way harder for anyone to snoop on what you're doing.
That's reassuring. I've heard a lot about VPNs, especially for like streaming shows from other countries.
That's a popular one for sure. VPNs can help you get around those geo restrictions so you can watch stuff that might not be available where you are.
I'm sold, but are there any downsides to using a VPN? I've heard they can slow down your internet speed.
Yeah, that's true. Since your traffic is going through an extra server, it can add a little lag. Some VPNs are better than others at minimizing that, though. So you got to choose a good provider with fast servers.
So not all VPNs are created equal. What else should I be looking for?
You want one with a strict no-logs policy, which means they don't track or store your browsing activity. And you want strong encryption protocols to make sure your data is really protected. Oh, and be wary of free VPNs.
Okay.
They might seem appealing, but they often have hidden costs, like selling your data or putting ads into your browsing.
Got it. So we've got proxy servers and VPNs. Those seem to be the most popular ways to mask your IP address. But are there any other options?
There are, for people who need like a really high level of anonymity, there's the Tor browser.
Tor browser, that sounds familiar. Isn't that the one people use to access like the dark web?
It can be used for that, but it's also used by journalists, activists, anyone who really needs to protect their identity or access information in places where it's restricted.
So like the ultimate privacy tool.
You could say that, yeah, Tor bounces your internet traffic through a bunch of servers all around the world. It's super hard to trace back to you.
Wow, that sounds intense.
It is, but even Tor has limits. The biggest one is speed, because your traffic is going all over the place. It can be a lot slower than a regular browser.
So it's a trade-off between anonymity and speed.
Yeah, exactly. You have to decide what's more important to you and pick the right tool for your needs. But even if you're not using Tor, there are other ways to make it harder for people to track your IP address. Have you heard of dynamic IP addresses?
Vaguely, something about your IP address changing.
Right. With a dynamic IP address, your internet provider gives you a new IP address every time you connect.
So it's like having a digital address that's always changing.
Yep. Makes it pretty tough to track someone over time. And then there's IP scrambling, which uses rotating proxies for every connection request,
Okay.
adding another layer to make things harder to see.
So instead of just one proxy server, it's like a whole team of them.
It's like a digital shell game for your IP address.
This is all starting to sound like a spy movie. Are there any more IP masking techniques we should know about?
There are a couple more that are really relevant for businesses, with so many people working remotely these days. One is called a shared gateway.
Okay, what does a shared gateway do?
It basically encrypts all the internet traffic coming from a company's network and gives each user a new IP address every time they connect.
So it's like a central hub for all the company's internet activity, keeping everything private and secure.
Right. It's a great way for businesses to protect their employees' data and make sure they're following all the privacy rules.
That makes sense. What was that other technique you mentioned?
It's called a virtual private gateway, and it's even more secure than a shared gateway because it gives each user a private IP address.
So like your own personal encrypted tunnel to the internet.
Exactly. It's the gold standard for businesses that need the highest level of security for their data transfers.
Wow, this is fascinating stuff. We've covered so much already, from proxy servers and VPNs to Tor and these advanced techniques for businesses.
We have, but there's one more question we should talk about before we go any further. Can someone still get your IP address even if you're using one of these masking techniques?
That's a great question, and one I think we need to dive into right after this.
Stay tuned. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about, is it really possible to make your IP address completely invisible?
Right, because it seems like there's always some way for someone to find a loophole or exploit some kind of vulnerability.
Yeah, that's true. No system is perfect. And there are ways for really determined individuals or organizations to figure out a hidden IP address.
Like who we're talking about? Give me some examples.
Well, government agencies, for example, they have those really sophisticated surveillance tools. They might be able to bypass some of these IP masking techniques. And of course, cyber criminals, they're always looking for new ways to break into systems and exploit vulnerabilities.
So even with all these layers of protection, we're not totally invincible.
It's important to be realistic. No security measure is foolproof. There's no such thing as 100% guaranteed anonymity online.
Okay, fair enough. But what about those vulnerabilities you mentioned? What are some common ways that these IP masking techniques can get compromised?
One thing to look out for is something called a DNS leak.
A DNS leak. That sounds bad. What is that?
Remember how we talked about DNS servers translating website names into IP addresses? Well, sometimes, even if you're using a VPN, your device might accidentally send a DNS request outside of the VPN's secure tunnel.
So it's like a little crack in the mask letting your real IP address slip out.
Exactly. It's subtle, but it can be a big deal. That's why it's so important to choose a VPN provider that has DNS leak protection.
Good to know. Are there other ways that IP masking can go wrong?
And there's always the risk that the IP masking tool itself could have a vulnerability, something that hackers could exploit. That's why it's crucial to keep your software up to date and choose providers that have a good track record for security.
So it's all about being proactive and staying ahead of the game when it comes to cybersecurity.
Exactly. And speaking of staying ahead of the game, let's talk about how cyber criminals are using IP masking for their own, not so good purposes.
Oh, yeah, I bet they're all over this stuff. It's like giving them the perfect tool to hide in the shadows.
You're right. IP masking is like a favorite tactic for all sorts of online bad guys. They use it to hide their identities, make it harder to track them down, and just evade detection in general.
So it's like they're putting on a digital mask before they commit a cybercrime.
That's a great way to put it. And they use a lot of the same techniques we've been talking about, like proxy servers and VPNs, but they often take it to a whole other level.
Give me some examples. How are they using this stuff to pull off their schemes?
One common tactic is ad fraud. They use bots to generate fake clicks on ads, stealing money from advertisers, and they use IP masking to make it look like those clicks are coming from real people all over the world.
So they're basically creating like an army of fake users, each with their own IP address.
Exactly, and they can even use what are called residential proxy networks, which route their traffic through real home internet connections, making it even harder to detect.
Wait, they're hijacking people's home internet connections? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a huge problem for businesses and advertisers. Another sneaky tactic is form jacking.
Form jacking? What's that?
It's when hackers insert malicious code into online forms, the ones you use to buy stuff or enter your credit card info.
So they're setting up like digital traps to steal people's sensitive data.
Exactly, and they use IP masking to cover their tracks. Then there are botnets, which are networks of infected computers that hackers can control remotely.
So it's like they have an army of digital zombies doing their bidding.
Pretty much, hackers can use botnets for all sorts of attacks, like DDoS attacks, which flood websites with traffic to take them down, or spamming and phishing campaigns.
So they're basically weaponizing IP masking for their own evil schemes.
Unfortunately, that's the reality. Cyber criminals are always going to try to find ways to use technology for their own gain, but that doesn't mean we should just give up on IP masking altogether. It's still a really important tool for protecting our privacy and security.
Okay, that's good to hear. But how can we tell if someone is actually trying to track our IP address or if we're being targeted by one of these schemes?
That's a tough one. It's actually really hard to know for sure if someone is specifically tracking your IP address.
So we're basically in the dark.
Not completely. While it's hard to pinpoint exactly where IP tracking is coming from, there are things you can do to stay vigilant and minimize your risk.
Like what? Give us some tips.
The most important thing is to keep your devices and software up to date. Those updates usually include security patches that can fix vulnerabilities hackers could use.
Good point. I'm definitely guilty of ignoring those update reminders sometimes.
We all are, but it's really important to stay on top of them and just be cautious about the websites you visit and the links you click. Avoid anything suspicious and don't click links in emails or social media messages unless you're sure they're safe.
Okay, that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
What else can we do?
Be mindful of the information you share online, especially on social media. The less you put out there, the less hackers have to work with, and use strong passwords and two-factor authentication whenever you can.
Those are all good reminders, but let's say hypothetically someone does get their hands on your IP address. What can they actually do with that information?
That's a common question, and there are a lot of misconceptions out there. Just because someone knows your IP address doesn't mean they can see everything you're doing online.
So it's not like they have a live feed of my browsing activity.
No, not at all. It's more like knowing someone's street address. They know generally where you are, but not what you're doing inside your house.
Okay, that makes sense. So they can see my location,
Yeah.
but not what websites I'm visiting or what I'm searching for.
Right. They can see general info like your location and your internet service provider, but they can't see the specifics unless they're using other tracking tools like cookies or browser fingerprinting.
So cookies are more than just yummy snacks.
In the online world, yeah, cookies are little files that websites store on your computer to track your browsing habits, and browser fingerprinting is a way for websites to identify your device based on its unique characteristics.
So it's like building a digital fingerprint of my online activity.
That's a good way to put it. It's another reason why IP masking is so important. It helps break that chain of tracking and makes it harder for websites to build a whole profile of you based on your online behavior.
This is all really interesting. We've covered so much today, from the basics of IP masking to like the dark side of cybercrime.
We have, but before we wrap up, there's one more question we need to address. Is it even legal to hide your IP address?
Right, that's a good question. I mean, if hackers are using it for illegal activities, wouldn't that make it illegal for everyone?
Not at all. Using tools like proxy servers, VPNs, Tor, even public Wi-Fi to mask your IP address is totally illegal in most countries, including the US.
So we can all breathe a sigh of relief.
For now, yeah. But it's always a good idea to check the local laws if you're traveling or living in a different country just to be safe.
Okay, good advice. We've learned a lot today.
Mm.
What are some key takeaways our listeners should remember about IP masking?
Well, first of all, IP masking is a really valuable tool for protecting your privacy and security online. It can help you avoid tracking bypass censorship and access content that might be blocked in your region.
And it's not just for tech experts or people with something to hide.
Right. It's for anyone who wants to take control of their online privacy and security, but it's important to choose your tools carefully and know the risks and limitations.
And remember, IP masking is just one part of online security.
Exactly. It's important to have a well-rounded approach to security, like using strong passwords, being careful about what you share online, and staying informed about the latest threats.
Great advice. So before we sign off, let's give our listeners some specific recommendations for good IP masking tools.
If you're looking for a reputable VPN service, NordLayer and Perimeter 81 are both solid choices. They offer strong encryption no-logs policies and have servers in a lot of locations.
And what about businesses that need to protect their entire network?
Perimeter 81 is a good option for businesses too. They offer enterprise-grade security features like those shared gateways and virtual private gateways that we talked about, which can be tailored to fit different needs.
Awesome recommendations. Any final words of wisdom?
Just remember that IP masking isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. You need to stay informed, stay vigilant, and be proactive about protecting your digital life.
Well said. And on that note, we're going to wrap things up. Stay tuned for our final thoughts and a recap of everything we've covered today. Welcome back to the AnzenGuard podcast. We've been talking all about IP masking, learning how to protect our privacy and security online.
It's like a digital shield helping us control our online identity.
We've talked about the tools like proxy servers and VPNs, and even the super secret sounding Tor browser.
But we also got real about the risks. Those vulnerabilities and how cybercriminals are always trying to exploit things.
Yeah, it's a constant cat-and-mouse game in the digital world.
But the good news is, we can take control of our online safety with the right knowledge and a little bit of effort.
So let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today. First of all, IP masking is essential for anyone who cares about their online privacy.
It's not just for techies or people with something to hide. It's about taking charge of your digital footprint.
We talked about how important it is to choose the right tools, like reputable VPN providers that offer strong encryption and no logs policies.
Remember, those free VPNs might seem appealing, but they can come with hidden costs, like selling your data or bombarding you with ads.
It's crucial to be aware of those things, and then, of course, IP masking is just one part of the bigger picture.
Right. We need a holistic approach, strong passwords, two-factor authentication, being mindful of what we share online. It all adds up.
It's like building a fortress around our digital lives.
And knowledge is our most powerful weapon. The more we understand about online threats, the better equipped we are to defend ourselves.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into IP masking, we hope you feel empowered to take control of your online privacy and security.
Remember, it's an ongoing process. We got to stay informed and stay vigilant in this ever-changing digital landscape.
I'm Michael Reynolds.
And I'm Laura Wilson.
Thanks for joining us on the AnzenGuard podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your friends and family. Let's all work together to stay safe online. Until next time, stay secure out there.